Welcome to Slideshow. My name is Dave Hayward and I'm the founder of Europa Creative Partners. Cracking episode in store for you today. We have Kerry Milne, founder and MD of Gap Strategy. She is an expert on personal brand. Now, before you immediately turn off this podcast, she herself acknowledges some of the issues around personal brand, and we confront that head on right at the start. But I promise you, her work is really interesting, very unique. Before the show, about a week before the show, she got me to fill out a survey, which is part of her process. So we are going to actually look at the results of that in terms of my personal brand. I'm a little bit nervous, but very excited to see what the results will be. I would just like to ask you to support the show by liking and subscribing if you haven't already. And so without further commentary from me, we're going to jump straight into Kerry's deck, where she takes us through an interesting detour to Western Australia in the 80s. So yeah, like I said, cracking episode. Let's get into it.
The thing that I know that everybody has done immediately is either gone to the next episode or vomited in their mouth a little bit, because the phrase or the idea of personal branding really gives us a visceral reaction. A very senior executive from my banking days said to me not that long ago that she would rather shit in her hands and clap. Why?
Oh my God.
And I think that is the general feeling that people have when you hear the term personal branding. It really does feel like it's something that belongs to influencers or linked-fluencers, maybe. It's more of a post-it note on a vision board than perhaps something that is going to help with sales.
It's not helped, let's be honest, by some of the people online. Like there's the kind of classic LinkedIn one I think of as the Broet tree, which is the gaps, the lines, and then they go all the way down. And then there's the guys that talk about the seven-figure consulting and all that stuff. It's very templated, it's very samey, so I'm not surprised that if you're someone who's got a great reputation in banking, for example, that you might be a little bit reticent.
Yeah, and I think the terminology personal branding is really, it's exactly what you've just described in terms of a bit of, tech bro magic sprinkles over reputation. Which leads me to my next slide, Dave.
This is great.
Kerry Milne, my dad, who was a bank manager in rural Western Australia.
Nice.
And for him, personal brand was his brown suit, his Old Spice, for sure, having his briefcase the night before and his lunches made for the week, and making sure that he was in at the branch before everybody else so that, his staff and his customers had the best experience for the day, right? That was what we would have called reputation. And it's now what we're calling personal brand. And the difference is that he used to say, what do you want people to say when you're not in the room? Now,
That's glorious.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure
Yeah.
I'm sure he didn't make it up, but he just used to say, okay, but what do you want people to say when you're not in the room?
Well, there's that brand strategist, and he talks about how brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is.
Well, you're stealing all my gems, but it's so true. It's like you've already got a personal brand, so your choice is own it and be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Or let people make it up for you. And so for my dad, I think he didn't have any content pillars and he didn't have a LinkedIn profile, but the concept is the same in that he was very thoughtful about it. He knew what he wanted to stand for and he was consistent. And it wasn't, I think I think it was probably before we started throwing around being authentic way too much. But I think that the reason that he was a very successful bank manager back in sort of the 80s was because he was really genuine and he was really consistent, and he probably had too much empathy for working in a big business back then. But his customers, it was when bank managers were your business banker and your small business advisor and your home loan person, they did the whole thing. He passed away about 18 months ago.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, that's thank you. Sorry, that's not the story. But someone who came to like his drinks thing afterwards came and introduced themselves and said, like, I was kind of a nobody with your dad, but he always made time for me, and he spent time and taught me about something that was this new thing called superannuation.
Wow.
And because of him teaching us, he came to our house and he sat down with Margaret and I and, spent time that he didn't need to spend. And he just said, you've got to do this. You've got to pay attention to this. And he's like, it was about 1987, 86. And he said, and because of your dad, we were able to retire with the things that we wanted and have a comfortable life.
Oh, that's a dream. That's beautiful. I was
Yeah.
actually, while we're trading great dad stories, I
Yes.
was actually at an auction once buying a house. I did buy the house. Anyway, it was in the auction and it was during when prices were ridiculous. And anyway, I was well out over my skis already. And there was one other person, an older guy, and he was bidding. He stopped bidding. And anyway, at the end, he came up and said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but Dad said, yeah, I laid carpet in your house in the 80s. And this guy was like, yeah, I just saw you there with your son, and I realized I didn't want to bid anymore. So I stopped because I realized that he was buying it for himself and I'm just buying it for an investment or something.
Very cool. And I think I didn't really understand what we were doing at the time. So we lived in a place called Kalgoorlie, which is probably equivalent to like Whangarei.
Yeah.
Or worse.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's pretty close to the desert and really hot, and it's a gold mining area. And in the 80s, yes, the wealth from mining money hadn't quite hit, and so there was quite a bit of poverty. And there's a lot of Indigenous communities around in that particular area as well. But on Sundays, we would go for a drive. Like, we knew that we'd go to church, like good Catholics that we were, turned my sister and I into heathens, and then we would go for a drive. And what that actually meant was we're going to go and visit some aged customers that Dad worries about, who live in caravan parks or in like out on stations, or like we'd go and like play cricket like in the communities and stuff like that. And at the time, I think my sister and I were like,
yeah.
But I look back now and I'm like, wow, that's really somebody who just stayed true to themselves. Like, just really was consistent with like what he said and how he behaved. Like, it was the kind of ultimate in personal branding for 1987. And particularly, you can see that he is the one with the dark brown suit.
Yeah, it's legend.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah.
That's coming up as well. Be very cool. Cool. So as we've said, right, your reputation precedes you. And where Kevin Milne had to worry about people coming into his branch, we have to think about the room being everywhere now, right? So our clients and our partners or our collaborators are not kind of defined by how close we live to them anymore. So having that presence and being intentional on how you show up online or in presentations or podcasts or whatever it might be is super important, because we buy from people that we trust and like, and we're going to check you out before we decide whether we're going to buy from you. So the I guess the kind of concept that personal brand is about being or about having millions of followers. Sure, I'm sure that there are, I'm sure that there are people that want that.
Yeah.
But for us kind of, normal people, the reason we should be thinking about our personal brand is because we have commercial goals. And increasingly, we know that what we stand for is important. So, because of the complexity of decision making, whether it is perceived complexity or real complexity, like the cycle time to a decision is just more steps in the process than there was before because we've got access to so much information, right? So we go find the information often to actually diagnose what the problem is that we need to solve because as as business owners or leaders in big businesses or even just leaders of teams, sometimes you're not quite sure what it is that's broken, and I think unlike 15 years ago, now we go and try and solve it for ourselves. So that makes that purchase cycle just more clunky and more difficult.
It's a weird time, and I think that it's also a very Aussie and Kiwi thing as well, is that kind of self-determination,
Just do it
needing
yourself.
to just do it myself. I interacted with someone today who's hopefully a new client, and his first thing to me was, he said, "I know something's broken, I just don't know what it is." And I'm like,
Honestly,
"Great."
I think that's a delight to hear somebody say that because, and it'd be interesting to know how many things he tried before he figured out that he didn't know the answer. But that is the kind of gold of working with people who have, we were talking about this yesterday, people who have been there, done it, seen it before, like got the scars, like, have got, maybe they've got the trophy as well, but they definitely know what not to do.
Yeah,
And you short circuit that kind of wheel spinning and just dumping money. Like, yeah, okay, go vibe code. It'll
yeah,
cost you less, except when you break down your hourly rate on
yeah,
how much vibe coding you've done, and then you're probably going to have to go and buy something or get someone to fix it anyway. So, and I'm talking to myself here as much as
yeah. Oh no, everyone's the same. I mean, it's just a really exciting and scary time at the same time.
it is.
For companies, saying no is as much as important as what you choose to spend your time on. So this is half the thing. We're all distracted, not helped by social media and lots and lots of options. But ultimately, the real question is, I can do this, but the real question is, should I do it? Go to someone like you and get the problem solved.
Yeah, and I think, there is a level of awareness, and I think, I don't mean to like get all deep because I definitely am not, but it's sort of like a level of sophistication and maturity in thinking to be able to go, I probably should like give this to somebody else now.
Yeah, yeah,
And when you, particularly as founders who are also running businesses, who are also needing to get new business, who are also needing to keep their business, there's a lot to think about and it's hard to sort of catch yourself. And so the discipline to do that is definitely a level of awareness. And I think as well, that's why this stuff is super important, right? Because you immediately are giving yourself an advantage by having thought through, like, what do I stand for? And therefore, when it comes to those things that I'm on the edge of, should I do it? Should I not? You've almost got like a bit of a kind of, well, a blueprint in that. Yes, this fits with my values. It fits with my business goals. It fits with my ideal client profile. Whereas we were talking about this yesterday, the consistency of being able to say, this is what I stand for. These are the things I talk about. These are the things I'm good at. And this whole concept of us being drawn to people who are memorable, like who are noteworthy or who have have an opinion. It's sort of like, what's different about you? Because I know 6 of you,
yeah.
or I'm connected with 35,000 of you on LinkedIn. What's different about you? And the way that we the way that we want to position ourselves for a commercial outcome is not, I want everyone to know who I am. It's, I just want these people to know who I am and think of me when they have that thing that they need to talk about or fix or whatever.
Yeah. So going back to your earlier point, this is not about going viral and getting as many people as you want. It's specifically about showing up consistent with your values to the people that matter most to you. That's really all it is.
Yeah. And I got you to do a survey ahead of
Yep.
this chat today. And one of the things that actually came out of that was you articulating the kinds of people that you work well with and want to work with. And so immediately you've got a little bubble forming around, cool, okay, well, that means that I can speak like myself. I don't have to be worried about what Johnny Chumpo thinks, because
Yeah.
I'll chat to him at the barbecue once a year or whatever. But I know that the people that I vibe with, the people can't say that anymore.
Yeah. Vibe. You can say vibe. I say we claim it, because it's an important
like,
word.
don't call your vibe coding something else. But yeah, it's very powerful when you say, I can credibly claim that I am an authority in that space because I'm not worried about Jan from, the place that I worked at when I was 17, what she thinks anymore.
I had this incredible revelation when I was about, I think quite late in life, mid-30s, something like that, which when I realized it, I think I knew it, but I didn't actually accepted it. And that is that I am not for everyone. Everyone is not for me. And when I realized that, the liberation, I feel like the shackles came off in a lot of ways because ultimately, what anyone thinks of you is none of your business, right? And so
none of your business.
and you've sort of got to hold these opposing ideas in your head, right? On the one hand, what people think of you is none of your business. On the other hand, you want to make an impression and surround them in reputation. So you do have to be cognizant of what you're doing, but I think it comes down to audience, right? It's actually understanding the people that matter most to you, and therefore, how do you want to show up for them, and everyone else is irrelevant,
Yeah, I do go on about this a lot, but the intentionality that comes with actually articulating what you've just said. So like, who exactly is my audience? Not what's their title, what's their
Yeah.
business, what industry are they in? But for example, you talked about, quirky people, like business leaders who are just trying, what did you call them? Fellow travelers, you said.
Yeah.
It's
Fellow
like,
travelers.
we're all
Yeah.
just trying to get there, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, and you said, I think you said something like, is like succeeding in business seriously, but they don't take themselves seriously. And that, like, the way that you articulated that is just like an incredible persona. And you've clearly thought about that before, because most people wouldn't get there in just kind of survey with what I work with, the work that I do with them. But it is, to your point, it is so unbelievably liberating, but also helpful when it gets to those times where you're like, I've got nothing to talk about. I've got like, no, I'm bored of my own voice. I'm bored of my own content. But actually, you think about, who am I talking to? And you know that you're actually on track, like you're okay. And though talking about how you're feeling comes to personal brand and content and showing up online and all those sorts of things that we say, that immediately builds more trust, because people know that you're not faking it every day, right?
I've read a study about, actually it came up in one of the earlier podcasts about, Avi was talking about how this elite restaurant used to deliberately create vulnerable moments from the staff so that people felt disarmed. They didn't feel like they were real snobby. So like
God.
that the waiter would sort of slightly trip or something like that to sort of say, because it's an elite restaurant, they're paying a lot and all that stuff. They wanted to make people feel like it's okay to be yourself here. And so that was one of the tactics they used was to create a little moment of kind of like a human moment that kind of reached them a little bit,
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of applies here.
Yeah, for sure. I think, the V word, which is equally visceral, and it's not visceral, but like, vulnerability. It's sort of like people would prefer to crawl under a rock or stick a pin in their eye.
That's true.
And so I think when you go through a process of sort of being intentional about your reputation or your personal brand, you don't have to be vulnerable about certain things, but being empathetic is important, and really understanding like where your guardrails are is perfectly acceptable. And again, it's helpful for when you want to think about consistency and your audience, like, excuse me, like, do they need to hear me bang on about my ADHD? Probably not. But I do know that every time I talk about it, I get people in my DMs saying, oh my God, I so relate, or thank you for talking about this, or whatever it might be. So I have built up to that though.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't just start. It took me a good couple of years to start talking about things that feel a bit heavier.
I saw a really great instance of it today, actually. There's this
Yes.
strategist I'm friends with who's amazing. And she just took a photo of her and her husband's desk, right? And her husband's is in operation. So his desk was immaculate, and hers was just like a total mess. There's just stuff everywhere. And I was like, that is absolute gold in terms of hitting what you're talking about. Like, she's not saying I am, she's in no way dismissing herself. She's not actually disparaging herself. She's just kind of identifying that strategists are often quite messy, and, that's that they're all about the 80%, not the last 20% like her husband is, So that I thought was a kind of bold, but also really endearing as well.
Endearing massively, and also how relatable.
Yeah.
For wherever you sit,
Yeah.
like whether you're a super kind of organized person or whether you're her, it's kind of, I think endearing is a lovely sort of way to describe that. But also this idea that sharing about ourselves is arrogant, or what are people in my program? Oh, yeah, braggy.
Braggy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It can be, and that's why you need to figure out your sort of tone. But at the same time, there might be someone that actually just needs to see that on that day. I think about some of my content that has weirdly gone mad, and it's usually things where I'm being self-deprecating or like
Right.
talking
Yeah.
about. It's very rarely where I'm saying, go and do your audience definition.
Yeah. But
Because
that's the balance. You've got to
yeah,
balance virality with consistency and substance, right? Because
like,
as much as I'd like my essays on brand activation and to go viral, it's not that. It's most likely it'll be like sometime when someone sent me a rude email and I put that up. That's the thing that goes wild.
yeah,
And you kind of need a bit of both, I think, as part of a healthy portfolio, I guess.
you do. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about that in a couple of slides. So that's a good segue to move on for me. We've sort of ticked this off, but I think, there's again, I don't know who said it, but some 10X, I no doubt, probably Hermosi or somebody like that, but you can't scale a secret. If you're not sort of visible and memorable, you're not going to be found. And I guess the sort of steps to converting visibility into new business or whatever that thing is that you want to do is you kind of need to get known first. Now, people still go to networking events, and that's their version of personal branding and their version of posting on LinkedIn, right? I couldn't think of anything worse. I couldn't think of anything more like painful than walking into a networking event with 30 people and everyone saying, "Oh, what do you do? What do you do?"
Yeah.
Because small talk is just so fake to me, right? And I'm just not built for it. Did it, I did it for years, and I think that that's probably how I ended up here. and have stayed here because I just I couldn't credibly be myself
Yeah.
in a s in and, speaking of neurodivergence, I have autism and ADHD. I'm in a room where I can hear the lights, like the music's going. I can hear a conversation like 3 meters away. And so I'm not being present with somebody, which then I feel rude. And then I get like annoyed at myself. And then so all of this stuff is happening. Whereas I think the first time we had a networking catch up, it was for 2 hours and we solved pretty much all of the 90s.
Peace. Yeah, totally. I think it's also about, it comes down to channel strategy, right? You've got these channels which you can for various reasons you choose. It might be a format or a forum that's really good for you, and other times it might be that's because where your audience is, And I think with networking, you got to be very careful that your audience is there, because otherwise you can end up in situations which I have many times. It's just you and your competition all kind of like pretending everything's going really well.
Sure. Or worse, it's no one that's relevant. Like, at least if your
Yeah,
competition's there, you can do a bit of, psyching out or
yeah,
bit of competitor review. But, I think you don't immediately get business by just showing up to networking events.
yeah.
Now, I have a client who is a very senior exec and like super connected, and is always going to, it feels like, is always going to things. And I say, how do you do that? Like, how do you, and her response is, I'm selective. Like, I'm so selective. I know who's going beforehand. Like, she's usually got hold of the attendee list.
Yeah.
If it's somebody that she wants to, like, she recruits executive directors, right? So she's got her eye on somebody for a role that she's filling or whatever it might be. She's there and she's like, I've seen her. She like kind of finds out where the person is that she wants to talk to and makes her way over. And all of a sudden she's got a meeting with them the next week. So like that for me is like really strategic networking. And I don't think that most people think of it like that. But
Yeah.
point
I have
around
to admit that
channels.
I'm shameless. I go to them all the time. I'm very selective about where I go, and I often know like getting a hold of the guest list is gold. I went to one and they had the guest list just lying around us, on paper, and they weren't using it, so I borrowed it, and
Sorry.
I emailed everyone on that list, and all they said was, "Hey, great to meet you." I
Did you
kind of
get any
felt like that
business
was
out
valid.
of that email?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And do you think that that was because you were, or was it actually because you were different and findable? It's like, here I am, you've got my email address.
I think it was part of it. It sounds a bit more cynical than it actually was, because I did talk to a lot of people there. So a lot of times when I got the list, I was like, oh, that was Anthony who I spoke to earlier. So I had made these connections with. So I thought it was kind of cool. And most of them had the company they were doing, so I was sending it to their work emails. But they were like, oh, it was like really great to chat to you. Really thought what you had to say on this topic was interesting, and keep in touch, sort of thing. It was very different to sort of like, tell me about your marketing business.
Yeah, I think, and it's a really good reminder that your approach, it doesn't have to be the same as mine.
No,
Again, I don't actually subscribe to the fact that there's a kind of a playbook to building your personal brand, because we change as kind of humans as well, right? And, before I left corporate, there's no way that I would ever miss, certain networking or seminars or awards or whatever, because everybody would be there. And imagine if I missed, like, talking to such and such and blah, blah, blah. Now you couldn't pay me to go to one because I know more about myself, the kinds of clients that I work well with, the kinds that I don't. And yeah, so I think like the idea that there's one kind of templated way to think about personal brand is yeah, it's not quite right. I think what is more helpful is thinking about the components that you can think about to build your own personal brand. That is something that does make you findable and memorable. People say, "Oh, I don't need one." Cool.
Yeah. Nice
Cool. So,
story.
I just listed these. This is like a list that just was in my head from redoing this prezzo. But it's like new business, right?
Yeah.
So where do you get new business from? You could get it from inbound. How do they find you? Are they finding you at networking events? Yeah, maybe. Cool. How else are they finding you? I'm going to go and look you up before I make any kind of real connection with you about spending money with you.
100%. Yeah.
And if I go to if you don't have a website, or if I go to your LinkedIn profile and you've got no photo on there, or it hasn't been touched since 1982 or whatever it might be, for me, immediately, I know that we're probably not gonna gel. So that intention piece is sort of, it's not the, I don't need to worry about it because I've got a business. It's like, yep, cool. But also, Brendan from your number one prospect company who needs to spend a bunch of money this year, he still cares who he's buying from behind the business, like behind the name of the business. So the business will get you in the door with Brendan, but then when you sit in front of him, you need to know what you stand for and how you are going to be likable and memorable, and what you can credibly talk about that's yours, because otherwise, old mate from your competitor is going to be coming in and he's done his homework.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And also, in marketing, the old days we used to talk about how you have to be, this is a terrible phrase, but you have to be touched like 7
7
times,
times, yeah, yeah.
or whatever it was. And I think now the frequency must be much higher.
The question shouldn't be like, do I need one? You already have one. So
Right.
you already have one. And I think I can't help people with the change of mindset around that without lots and lots of chat over coffee and examples and stuff. So people, I think, to start a process around, okay, well, how do I do it? You kind of need to have come to that understanding that you already have one, and your personal brand is actually just your reputation. And if you are not worried about managing your reputation, and you're happy that, you're getting enough business and your sales cycle is schmicko and it's not affecting your reputation or your personal brand or what people think about you when you're is not impacting your business goals and your growth, then cool. Like, no worries. If you have kind of managed to get past that, then there's 2 other things that pop up. And they are, how the hell do I do it without sounding like a bragging douchebag?
Yep.
And how do I do it consistently without burning out? And under these 2 things are some interesting sort of psychology for the first one, because we need to define, what does douchebag sound like for you? What is that? What do you mean by that? Because there's a good chance that you're the only one that thinks that, you sound like that, unless you are ex-mate from, buy my course. So the process of defining exactly how you want to sound is super important. And then that leads on to the second part, which is you have kind of built yourself a little framework, and therefore the being consistent piece is less hard. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's less hard.
I think this is a bit that probably a lot of the audience are really curious about, because there's certainly been a lot of people with frameworks around, and they're really like, I tend to think like that, so that I get that. But the actual thing is the how. How do we do it? Functionally, how do you go about it?
Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry that I don't have like a fancy framework.
Uh-huh.
Um, because I do think that it is at its very, very at the baseline for me, there are 5 things that I think are easy to understand and also easy to own.
Right.
So maybe that was like unique, like we can uniquely own a piece. So it's not dissimilar to maybe how you would think about building a corporate brand or a business brand, but clearly the fundamental difference is how it reflects you. So you've got your voice, which is essentially your tone of voice, but also your communication style. And I think that anyone who has worked in corporate for any amount of time will feel this when I say, like, any uniqueness around communication style is beaten out of you. So you have to toe the line when it comes to how you interact, how you behave in meetings, what your emails look like. Did you follow exactly the right process and talk to Brenda before you talk to James? And, I think it really did take it probably took me 5 years, I think, of being out of, corporate for 25 years to go, I was literally just like putting on a mask, like putting on a whatever color of the logo was or the business was. It's like I wore that one. And then every now and then I would accidentally reveal a little bit more of myself and I'd, get bashed on the head. It's like, get back down. We don't do that.
I always have this one thing that used to always happen when I was in corporate, which is that you'd always have this kind of thing where they do a slide deck or whatever, and then they'd go, any questions? And it took every atom of my will not to go, yeah, I was just wondering, obviously we are made up of all of these elements that come from stars that died millions of years ago from unfathomable distances. It's pretty unlikely we're here even. Like, why do you think we're here? And then they'd be like, and yeah, no, I meant the PowerPoint. I meant the PowerPoint. Yeah, no questions.
But like, whatever the question, whether it be about the stars or not, don't be cheeky. Like, don't be funny. Don't be in any way, like, don't behave in an unexpected way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think part of my story of how I started talking about personal brand, which is absolutely mind blowing really when I think about who I was in corporate world, but it's because this whole idea that I was so sick of everyone sounding the same. Like, I was just so, like, even on LinkedIn, before I understood that you could actually, have a feed that wasn't kind of like tech bros or hashtag gratefuls, and you could have like really smart people and find like your kind of equally weird and quirky tribe. Everyone just sounded the same. What was really interesting and probably also not that surprising is when I started like writing the way I talk,
Yeah.
people came out of the woodworks. And then of course it multiplies. So you kind of find more of the same, and it's not the same as what you had before, because we don't want the fakeness. We really do we want that kind of genuine. I'm trying so hard to avoid the word authenticity because it's been so overused, but we want that genuine realness. And communication style, post today from somebody who was writing about how she's not using AI to draft her posts anymore.
Oh.
And I would put my house on the fact that she had used AI to draft her post. And the problem is with people like me and you, like, we've got pattern recognition. So we see it, we know, and I wish
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah. But the other thing is, what an unoriginal thing to say, because that is basically half of LinkedIn at the moment. It's either don't use M dashes or do use them. It's got its own little subset of things, like any online community, really. It's got its own things that it gets obsessed with.
So we've got voice, which is more than just tone, but also style. And I'm using the word quirkiness with your permission.
Yeah.
For some people that might be offensive. For me, it's like a massive gold medal and I'd like to also have it. Um,
Yeah.
you write the way you speak, and you even do wild things like try and make analogies out of, 70s music or Diana Ross and Nile Rodgers to make something entertaining, right? Which is like, that's your communication style. Signature beliefs are things that are our unique perspective on something. And it probably sounds a little bit more puffy than it tends to end up being. But when we talk, our belief systems just come out. So you and I have been talking today, and we definitely have a belief system around things like credibility, around things like being yourself and not having everything polished. And I think we also would, just thinking about our chat today, we also are quite reflective. So I haven't asked you what your beliefs are, but just from the way that we've been speaking in this conversation, they kind of connect and float to the top when you are somebody who's like outside looking in.
Yeah, I understand. So it's almost like the signature beliefs is something that comes through implicitly rather than explicitly.
And again, the whole, the whole kind of point around being intentional about your personal brand is when you are asked about it, you start to sort of use words and phrases and share stories and ideas, and they're coming through because the right question has been asked of you to kind of encourage them to come through. And then we've got audience, which we've spoken about. I bang on about this in my coaching and my programs. I don't mean who do you want to sell to?
Right.
I mean, who do you want to sell to? Who do you want to partner with? Whose podcast do you want to be on? Like, what in 4 years' time, what like you want to be known for. Therefore, who are the people you need to have in mind for that on the way through, right? It does really, it can bog people down. And I think that it is one of those things that I encourage people just to start, just write down who you think you would like to work with, for example. And that's the comment that I was making earlier about you being you really know, you're very specific about like what you have been able to articulate in just one sort of survey that I asked you a question on is what I would hope that people can get to.
Right.
It's also your area of expertise, right? Like you help clients do that, and you have definitely thought about it before. I don't know. Do you think have you ever reflected on how useful that is for yourself in terms of being
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Because ultimately, when I was at art school, I came to the realization that I was basically making for my friends. And once I started thinking with that kind of specificity, if I can say that, it kind of liberated me, and it made the work better, frankly, because I wasn't trying to impress everyone with everything. I wasn't trying to, earlier podcast was talking about Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and where someone said to him, well, because at one point he was like the biggest DJ in the world, and they said to him, how did you get to be the biggest DJ in the world? And he said, I didn't. I was just trying to be the best on my street, and then pretty soon I wanted to be the best on my block. And then, and it kind of escalated from there. And I kind of think that with audience, that's what was really, that's how I write, rightly or wrongly, and it also happens that things like the newsletter and people who watch the podcast, they sort of accumulate, and then you start getting more information about who they are, and then that starts informing how you write.
Yeah. And I think the energy that comes with working with the right clients. So as opposed to the energy that comes with accidentally working with the wrong ones, it's a completely different, well, obviously it's totally opposite in terms of enjoyment level, but just in terms of kind of, I think of it like there's a tax to working with people that are difficult. Now, they might be difficult for you and not difficult for somebody else, but knowing what that looks like, knowing who you're not for is so powerful. So content pillars, look, is just one of those again, one of those probably overused phrases, but I just like to think of it as the topics or the angles that you like to talk about, that you can talk about in a way that is different to other people. And do those topics match a problem that you're solving for that audience? It seems like a very simple formula, but it also is not easy for some people because otherwise they would do it more inherently, right? So thinking about those topics or angles or content pillars is so valuable when it comes to that consistency piece, because you've kind of like given yourself some markers to go, okay, I'm going to talk about, like, one of the things that I know that I am ahead of the curve on is AI efficiency. Cool. There's probably a load of people talking about AI efficiency. What makes me different? I've been testing it for longer than most people have. I have got some case studies that are actually showing results, and I've got some good stories of where it didn't work, or some, some research that says avoid that. So I think the kind of connection between what can I talk about that is solving a problem and how can I talk about it differently is like the sort of the gold.
The other element to this is that everything is derivative to one sense or another. Like when I was, again, at art school in the 90s, there were no internet, so you didn't really know what other people was doing. I remember one time going to a rival art school and I'm like, oh my God, there's me over there. There's a guy doing exactly what I'm doing. And there's another one. That woman over there's doing it. I realized that, it's great art. It's just making something you want to see, really. So, if it just so happens I want to make more of it, and there are certain idiosyncratic things about the way that I make work or do anything that will mean that it's recognizably mine anyway, So once I kind of completed that kind of paradox loop, I was like, yeah, okay, I don't need to be the most original person in the block. In fact, it's actually more admirable that people take influence from people who know what they're doing and get a lot better that way.
Well, if like this kind of little mini Trivial Pursuit arc thing is to get you to that place where you are getting trusted, like getting known, getting trusted, getting hired, and being memorable and likable. It doesn't say that you have to be the very best at it.
No.
But what you're talking about there is actually brilliant, because it's kind of going to be a pretty unusual scenario where we're in a category of one, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at this blueprint, and where I see even just that example, let's like fast forward and you're an artist, where you are going to be different to most people is your ability to tell a story.
Right. Yeah.
And so you add the communication aspect, and you might have one story that is relevant to 3 different types of audiences, and you know how to like massage it a little bit for each time, or you change it up to tell it at a keynote versus writing it on a post. So your uniqueness might not be the thing that you do, it might be the way that you talk about it. These sound bites are things that you say that you either know you say, or like you might just get picked up. So the way that I think that writing your LinkedIn about section is the same as doing your personal brand. Like I don't think you can do it yourself without help.
Right.
Because we just are so hard on ourselves. Firstly, we're probably not saying things out loud, but we're not listening for like little dots that we can connect that are absolute golden stories. And so sound bites come up when I either ask people to fill out that survey that you filled out, or I do that as well as I might interview them. So the next step would be that I would pull out 5 content pillars that I thought were interesting that came out of your survey and what I know of you, and play them back to you and say, like, do you have any stories that might link to these angles? And in the process of telling stories and sharing you do it so well, little kind of memories or anecdotes or whatever it might be, things come out that are repeated, or that might be like what was the one I said to you yesterday about
Oh, that one comes up all the time. Yeah, you can't see the label when you're inside the jar. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So perfect example, right? That links to your belief system, which is that whole level of awareness piece and making sure that you're reflecting and acknowledging, I guess, like in the context of this, like acknowledging like what's unique and what's you and what can you credibly talk about? What do you need to do that's different for your audience? So you could see how that sort of stuff all starts to link together. Those little sound bites, like I think you had one, I've seen one in your newsletter that's about we're all just pumping the well,
Waiting for some water to come, basically,
waiting for
and
some
you
water
just
to
go,
come. And I know that these are also sort of phrases that might be ones that you've picked up along the way, but you'll have ones that are yours as well, like your fellow travelers and things like that. So it's just or almost when you think about a brand, and it's like, we talk about brands that have like unique things that are identifiers. So like their color or their font, or it's actually hard to build credibility, right? But it's even harder to build authority. And the difference between credibility and authority is credibility is, yep, I've got the runs on the board. Like if I say I'm going to do it, I'll do it. Authority is Dave said to do that, so I'm going to do it because he
"Wow,
is the
yeah,
guy. Like
he knows that guy knows his stuff."
so authority is where you want to get to when it's, you want to be the person that people think of immediately when they've got that problem.
Yeah, interesting.
And so to get to authority, we kind of have to go through a bit of again, a bit of a considered process. I've called it the credibility filter, but all it is thinking about saying, like, my experience. So the fact that I am, I've worked in marketing for 20 years, and therefore I'm an expert at branding, audience definition. I've got a title and I've got an award, but actually I can tell you some stories about all of the things that have happened to me over the years and like the failures and the wins. And immediately you kind of go from, yeah, there's a level of credibility here to, might need to talk to Dave about that thing we've been thinking of. What came through in your awesome survey was this this real sense that you haven't had a traditional career path, and you talked about how that you worried about that for a long time. And so what I have done is managed to articulate what you were probably already saying, and it actually starts to form the basis of some of your brand, right? So you already know the detours that got you here are the value. School, coffee roasting, Italian welding equipment, Auckland Rugby League, a career that looks like accidents, but built something nobody else could replicate. You didn't want to sound off the edges or pretend to be corporate. You wanted to show up as yourself, quirky, direct, and comfortable with complexity. So all of those words, they're yours. I didn't
Wow.
I haven't I guess I've sort of taken them and jumbled them around and turned them upside down, but I've never used quirky. I haven't like talked about, the idea that this is messy, but putting everything into one big mixing pot, this is how we start to build out something that if it
Yeah.
sounds like you.
Well, it's, on a personal level, it's awesome for a start, but it's all the accuracy of it is a bit scary in some ways.
Yeah. I think that the accuracy, like if I had done this with you a year ago, it probably wouldn't have been
Yeah.
as good, which
Yeah.
of course is the idea with, building second brains and things like that, but also my clarity around what I want to ask you. So that's changed. And then so has the I guess the kind of formula or what sits behind it. So I spoke about the 5 pieces of pie. In your survey, I asked you to ask what other people said about you. And this is always really quite a cool thing to do because, unless you're in level 7 in some corporate
Yeah.
or government department and you have to do a 360, you really don't go and ask people, like, what is it like to, one of the things I asked you to ask people is, what is it like to work with me when I am on? This idea of a mix of high energy and zero ego came through. And I think there's a comment around high octane energy. And then I asked you things like, what do you want to be known for? Obviously, this wasn't a question. It was sort of things around the other two questions, like what lights me up? What do I care about? And also, what do people come to me for? What problems am I always fixing? And I think where that sifts through to these kind of 5 dot points is really interesting. So you want to be known for clear thinking in environments that are noisy and fast moving and people are often overconfident. You care about long-term thinking and you've built a career on systems, failures and wins, and therefore you've been there. So you've got the scars and you've got the therapy bills.
Yeah.
You probably haven't got the therapy bills because you're a janitor.
No, I have therapy bills. I think, yeah, I've invested heavily in that sector, so
Good,
that's all good.
And so this is where it comes to a really nice place when we're talking about why bother doing this. Like, you are not interested in likes. It would be nice to get impressions, but they have to be the right ones. This is not about being famous for you. You genuinely get a thrill from solving problems for people, like from solving problems for clients that they weren't able to do themselves. And so I think the way that your personal brand will move and probably is already in a really good place is the credibility aspect. Like, your credibility is huge. The opportunity is to make sure that you're signaling more often and more consistently and with a little bit more variety and breadth. And by that, all I'm saying is think about what you want the objective of certain pieces of content to be, rather than I'm just putting this newsletter out or I'm just writing this post. It's like, this post is specifically to build my authority in AI and I'm going to write a mini case study, whatever it might be. But that kind of move from credibility to authority, so that when
Nice.
anyone's thinking about, like, how do I make my business more efficient with AI, that's not just like what some consultant's going to get from the bottom drawer and sell to everybody. Like, I want somebody that I can trust. I got to go speak to Dave.
Yeah, well, that's the dream, isn't it? So one of the things that I found interesting is that consistency thing that you've talked about in the earlier slides and in here.
Yeah.
It's any system you build has to work in your worst state, not your best state, right? And this is one of the things I have to admit that I struggle with a bit. We've been super busy at Europa the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. And my ability to kind of do that feeding and watering has dropped off, mostly because I sort of hit a bit of a plateau. I got very bored with my own content and all this kind of stuff. And this is why doing this exercise with you has been great, because it's kind of revitalized it in a way, because it's also made me realize that a lot of the stuff that I'm getting bored with, my audience isn't bored with, or hope not anyway.
Yeah.
But generally we talked about that yesterday, which is that idea that of campaign fatigue, which has just changed now in the digital world. I'm not even sure it's a thing anymore,
No.
because people just aren't seeing it at the sort of the high frequency that they used to.
No, and have so many options to not see it if I don't want to.
Yes.
As opposed to back in the day where we were spending loads of money on TV campaigns to make sure that we were getting the right reach and tarps and all of those sorts of crazy things. Like, that's just not, we can't control the audience like that anymore because they've got too many options. What lights me up is always a really cool thing to play back to people, because it's often not, I want to build a new big something something. It's this idea, like you talked about the satisfaction of watching a Ferrari finally get off the dirt road and onto the highway where it belongs. That's like that aspect of seeing something drop for someone. Like you get that is totally something that lights you up. Your origin story, which is just, it's a weird thing for people to do, like to write about yourself, but it's such a powerful thing because immediately you can introduce yourself with a version of that. You can, update your bio. You can think about your about section on your LinkedIn. You can think about your website, like all of the things that can come from actually having written the parts of your story that you feel like led you to where you are right now. So it's not like I was born and then this happened and then this happened. It's like where I am right now, the pieces that I think are important that got me here are these 3 things or these 4 things. And then I turn that on its head and go, okay, cool. Well, what do you really want to be known for based on all the things that you've told me? And yours came up with the chaos monk who helps you find the real problems worth solving and build solutions that actually work for humans. And I think that is so cool.
Yeah.
And again, it's like it's from your inputs, right? Like it is cool because you had really quality inputs that you'd thought about. And that doesn't mean that I haven't had some great ones when people have done this sort of thing for the first time, because I really have. It's just that I think, yours is fairly descriptive and specific, and that's cool.
I got a little bit emotional when I saw that. So, I mean, if I was known for that, I'd be delighted, really.
I mean, there's so many things that I could say to that. Like, how do you know that you're not? And then look, audience, we spoke about, I think this again is a really nice thing to play back to people because they generally do know more about their audience than what they thought they did when they were sort of at the start. But your audience line is so cool. At the top, we've got the things that you said specifically. And then I have obviously just extrapolated that a little bit based on my knowledge of audiences, but also my knowledge of like what I've seen other people work through in this process.
Yeah.
And then you end up with helping fellow travelers cut through AI friction and solve real problems. Or I guess like at a more conversational level, I help quirky leaders and smart teams see past the slot, which we would change because we hate that word.
Yeah.
This is the first draft and I would change some words in here, but the sentiment is amazing. Like the sentiment is very you, right? So it's that idea that, like, don't do AI for the sake of it.
No, and who's got time anyway? Like a lot of people, I think I'm neither an AI hypist nor an AI doomer. I'm somewhere in between, and I think the technology is amazing, but it's got its place, and figuring out where that place is the whole game.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a credibility thing for you. Like you've got the credibility to talk about that. That might come from don't do what I did. Don't waste your time. Like, don't do this. But when you say I've moved over to Gemini, I go, oh God, all right, I have to move over to Gemini now. So I think that there's definitely an authority that has built there definitely for some people who are like in your high touch.
Yeah, 100%. And I myself was influenced by Mark Lawrence, who said
Yes.
he's moved over to Gemini, and I mean, he has to do all of them, but he's like, for our business, for our core, our internal business.
Yeah. Well, that's another great example of having Mark Lawrence on Slideshow was obviously great for Slideshow, and I assume great for Mark as well. It was that episode and hearing you and Mark talking that I kind of went, oh my God, this man knows what he's talking about from a business perspective and from a like really tackling not the surface level nonsense that everybody else talks about, but actually, the things like, I don't know which one to start with, and I don't know Like, what is all the noise around privacy? And what is the difference between what I need to know about it and what I need to do with it? Like, how I need to be.
That's nice. Yeah, that's
Oh, you
Mark
guys
thing. Yeah,
real
totally.
you guys really tease that out, and I think that yeah, I think, like, that's a great example of, like, authority building.
Your greatness is in the agency of others, basically. And yeah, I'm just really lucky that I'm surrounded by people like him who are just, and you, who are really at the top of their game.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. So, look, I'll skip through this. This is the 3 E's that we spoke about.
Yeah,
Your kind of expertise, your experience, and making sure that have got evidence around it and you can talk about it. I think your evidence in particular, um, I've said here, could do with some more daylight.
yeah, yeah, it's true.
But you've got it. Like, you've actually got the stories because you've got the scars and you've got, like, the awesome perspectives. It's more, how do you package it up more intentionally? And here is your blueprint. So your voice is this is your sort of, I guess, your kind of sweeping statement around your voice. So, high octane energy balanced with cosmic perspective, the voice of a chaos monk who's seen it all but still gives a damn.
Nice. Yeah, very cool.
And then your signature beliefs that came through were the ones around, humanity becoming a luxury good. So, like, that realness aspect of, certainly of personal brand, but also, like, of how we do business. The sentiment around making a business more efficient and less human, like, where is the tension there and how does that work? Like, what should people be thinking about and what's your belief around that? And then you've got, these are ones that you've spoken about before, that your value is directly proportionate to the pain that you take away.
Yeah,
And your detours are the value. It's the old war horse path. We'll just touch on the pillars. I think what I would do with this is, in my process, I would sit with you and go through it.
yeah,
And we would tease it out a little bit. Like, there's things in here that I don't really like, but you might be okay with. And I also think that there's well, actually, I know so because I have done another version of this since
yeah.
this one.
That's it.
There's actually stories that kind of push you into that uniqueness and memorability, even more so than you are already, because you're such a great storyteller. But your 5 pillars where I landed for your first draft were around the human premium. So that's that idea of, how do we keep the human aspect of working relationships and business structures, etc. And I've got that weird one in there around hospitality, which has obviously been
Yeah,
picked up from the previous
from Harvey's
ones.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The redo paradox, which you just spoke about.
yeah,
The idea of spending, like, we're saving time on AI, cool, but how much are you spending in redos and in your, hourly rate that we spoke about earlier? And then the deep problem fix. Diagnosing the problem is, I reckon, 70% of the battle.
it is also, for those of us who've been in tech a long time, it's a really common, thing because you work with these brilliant minds and their minds are moving so fast that they go from the problem to the solution. And by the time they come to you, they've got half the solution and the problem, it's all messed up. So I think the skill or the game is to actually get to the bottom of what the actual problem is in the first part and pass out all the other and see those solutions they've given you as options, but not the actual problem. And understanding the problem is the first step. It's always the first step.
Yeah. But I think it is one of those, it is one of those powerful things to be able to say, can't quite figure out what the problem is. I need someone to help me diagnose it. You would have felt this as well, no doubt. Like, people come to you and they're like, oh, we need a new CRM. Okay, cool. Talk to me about how your sales team use the CRM now. They don't use it because it's so rubbish. Okay, what would be their ideal CRM? Oh, they haven't really used one before.
I read a book once called How to Worry Less About Money. And one of the things that the author talked about was that he'd fixated on having a new car for like a long time. And he realized in the end that he didn't need a new car. What he wanted was a tidy car. His car was always a mess. And he thought, well, if I get a new car, then that won't be a mess. Kind of like, then he kind of realized he was totally future tripping. So why would the new car be any better than the old car? The new car would probably start out cleaner, but then it'll probably just end up the same as the old car.
I can remember my very first consulting project out of corporate. And I met with this client and they said, this prospect didn't know them. And they were like, oh yeah, we need some more email campaigns. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to be the person to help you with that, but like, tell me a bit about what you've got at the moment. Like, what are your open rates and conversion rates, and where are you getting your leads from? Like, what is email versus website, and what's your I asked all these questions, and he was like, I don't know. We've never done email before. Oh,
Wow.
okay. So yeah, it turned out they needed an entire brand platform, and
Yeah.
a messaging hierarchy, which we ended up
Yeah.
doing. But I think for lots of people, saying I don't know what the problem is not a natural thing. And so, yeah, you can definitely waste time and money and energy. And that's it. I've also got for you, which we'll work on, whether you like it or not, is sort of the next part of that. Like, how do you systemize it? And so, yeah, it's probably not much point in talking about it here, but other than to say, I've built you a custom GPT content buddy.
Yeah.
Within that content buddy is all of the thinking and the background that we've spoken about. I've also built in what I call a proxy panel, which is no doubt the voices that you have in your head, because we all have them, about the thing that you can't say, or the
Right.
thing that
Yeah.
what will 17-year-old art school Dave think about that. And I think it just gives people who aren't that comfortable or aren't regular content creators, it just gives them a softer landing if they want to say, oh, is this too salesy or is this too braggy? Just put it in and say,
Yeah.
can you do a proxy panel review?
Sort of like check yourself before you wreck yourself,
Yeah, and also
But
you're probably overthinking it, and there's nothing wrong with it.
no, and there's also like one thing I've said to clients many times is there is nothing wrong with asking for the sale. That's what we're all here to do. And I find it interesting on LinkedIn when people complain about someone asking them for a meeting in their DMs. I'm like, what do you think it's for? Like, honestly, I mean, obviously I get crazy ones. I just ignore them. That's
Yeah,
fine.
for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Or you could rage reply like me and
Yeah.
use them as
Yeah.
examples of what not to do.
All caps. Yeah. If people are sort of curious about this whole thing, it does work. Like I've genuinely got work that way from people who just liked what I wrote on LinkedIn. It's those different touch points that just kind of reassure people that you do know, you sort of break down their resistance to, if I can say that without sounding like a bit weird. Maybe
Well,
that's the wrong word, but you're sort of like, you're just sort of reassuring them that you are who you say you're going to be. Oh, here we go. No,
yeah,
nice.
no, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Like you're standing out, and you're doing it in a way that is resonating with them. And so they then take that next step. Like, there is absolutely no doubt that this works. And I think that the thing about the idea of being strategic around what it is that you want to say and where and to who is you won't be sort of relevant to everybody at the same time.
No.
And so the idea of being consistent is where you consistent, but making sure that you're keeping true to what it is that's different about you. That's how they get to that. Oh yeah, I know that guy. We need to talk to him about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's it.
you've done all of these things but this is kind of the why and the what, but the how is working with someone like you, right? So how do people get in touch with you if they want to?
Firstly, as you know, normally I live in LinkedIn.
Yep.
So you can always find me there. You can find me website at the Gap website.
Yep.
It's
I'll put the details in. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
notes. And yeah, I've got some cool sort of free downloads and stuff if anybody wants to have a look at asking, but yeah, as you know, having gone through the first step in the process, you have to ask yourself some questions.
What's really interesting about this whole process is it's kind of like taking your insides and turning them outside, right? But in doing it in a way that's palatable. As you were talking, I was sort of thinking about there's certain, like I'm a Gen Xer, right? So I'm totally emotionally repressed. You're not going to find me crying in my car or whatever some of the stuff that younger generations can do and get away with, But on the other hand, I am completely open about the fact that I do make mistakes and have made mistakes, and I've had all these kind of weird things happen to me. And so I think that is kind of figuring out that's why you need people like you to help you define those boundaries, essentially, because I think unless you do it, then it is like open season. Every time you go to open your post thing, you're just like, I don't know what to post about.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm obviously also a Gen X, and I'm never going to ask you to manifest anything, right?
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of someone asking you questions, not all of it is like massively insightful or massively like deep. It's just when you say it out loud or when you think about it, it's helpful.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well,
having me,
it's been amazing. And like I said to you before the show, I really hope you'll come back, and thank you so much for coming on the show. And I hope you had a great time.
Thank you. I did. Thank you.